Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to a special episode of the Creative Cranium. I've got a terrific guest today, and I can't wait to talk to her. Please welcome author and creator, Sarah Webb. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's a real pleasure. I was looking forward to meeting you, and we met initially through one of the Facebook groups, right?
That's right. Yes, yeah. I've recently started trying to join the sort of comic book community a little bit more because I've enjoyed comics for years, but I've not really. I'm a new creator, so the sort of getting into the communities on Facebook and stuff has been really good fun.
And you've done a good job because that's how I stumbled across your new book, Knave of Hearts. I have it correct?
You do, yes,
And
yeah.
that's released on Amazon now. And I was lucky enough to read it. And, I think you have a terrific first book, Sarah.
Thank
Congratulations.
you so much. Thank you. It's been a labor of love.
Well, I wanted to ask you, it's a little bit different type of book, right? It's got kind of a wild storyline and sort of supernatural. And who were some of your influences when you were creating your first book?
So I have been a massive fan of Neil Gaiman for many years. I really enjoyed the Sandman comics, and I'm also a big fan of Lore Olympus, which I know was originally a webtoon, but certainly over here in the UK, you can now buy sort of in book form, which is, I don't know if you're not familiar with it, it's like a retelling of the Greek gods,
Oh,
but as in a sort of business setting. I'm probably
I
not
see.
selling this very well. I'm
Yeah,
so
I
sorry
don't.
to the
And what's it
creator,
called?
but
What's that
Lore
one called?
Olympus.
Nora Olympus. Okay, sure.
Yeah, and it was definitely on Webtoons originally, but I kind of stumbled across it in my local comic books shop where they'd obviously compiled all the Webtoons episodes into, I think they're up to the fourth sort of graphic novel. And it's mostly the retelling of Persephone and Zeus, and them kind of falling in love. And as someone, I did like we called it classical civilization, but it was basically ancient history at school. So for someone that loves that kind of, I love the sort of stories of the ancient gods and stuff. And so that was a both of those sort of authors, creators were big influences for me. I also love there's a creator called Roman Dirge, which I think he was quite well known in the 90s, but possibly not quite so well known now. But he wrote a series of stories called Lenore, and a lot of it is like a nod to Edgar Allan Poe, and
I
Lenore's a
remember
little
that one.
dead girl.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's beautiful.
and the humor in it,
Yeah,
like it's rare that I sit giggling at a book, but with those comics, I was definitely sort of sat there giggling.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's been quite a I like to put a bit of humor in what I'm doing, and so I think there's been a little bit of an influence there as well.
Excellent. And you're preaching to the choir. I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan, and I definitely got that vibe from your new book, Knave of Hearts, in the most positive way. If you're a fan of that type of material, definitely recommend our viewers to check that out. Let's circle back around to the characters. You've got some pretty
Yeah,
wild characters, right? And there's a little bit of a musical, it's sort of blended into a rock band tale. So
yeah. So
I guess the
they, oh,
characters, are
sorry.
they based on anybody you know, or how did you create them?
Yes. So during COVID, I listened to a lot of music, and Facebook kept sort of spamming me with a band called Esoterica. Um, and initially I was like, oh no, just like I'm not like Facebook ads, ugh. But actually, there was one particular track called, which was a cover of a song called Silence. That I'm trying to remember who originally did it. I think Sarah, I want to say Sarah McLachlan, but I'm not sure if that's actually her name. But it was a very famous 1990s dance track, is how I remembered it. But they do it in a very um, sort of prog rock, prog metal, kind of ethereal metal, I think is probably the best way to
Nice.
describe it.
All
And
right,
that
sweet.
song just grabbed me. And this is going to go off on a long tangent, so apologies in advance. But
It's okay. We're interested.
uh, I really like their music, and for the first time in about sort of 10 years, and I had a bit of an art theft, so where some nasty scumbag stole some art, one of my art folders out of my car that included all my original comic strips that I'd ever drawn, including the first one I got published. So I'd had a bit of a hiatus of drawing anything comic related after that, but I was listening to their music, and for the first time in a long time, I drew a little comic. Like, it was just a silly one panel kind of nod to a story that was posted in an interview that they did about the lead singer went and bought a coconut, which is like a weird thing to buy when you're on tour from a service station. And I don't know, it just kind of grabbed me. So I drew this little comic strip and posted it up, and the band themselves, actually, well, whoever manages their socials, liked the picture. And I was like, oh, okay.
Ah, cool.
This is kind of, maybe this is something I could like do something a little bit more. And I
Hey,
kind of,
maybe a sign.
maybe a sign. And I ended up sort of sitting there, and just the story poured out of me. Like, I'm not a natural writer. My background is in art. But yeah, I just kind of sat there and farted out the whole story of Knave of Hearts. I think I called it Food Poisoning to begin with. It's gone through like a couple of different titles, but the more I wrote, the more I was like, actually, I'm going to really enjoy drawing this. And I reached out to the fan group of the band, and through that, actually got to meet the band. And actually, like, have met them a couple of times now. I'm fairly friendly with some of the members, so they themselves have helped me to write their characters a little bit. I sort of got a lot of background from
Oh,
them
okay.
about what they're like as people, and they are all really lovely. Like, if anything seems to nod to them being not nice people or idiots in my comic, that is my artistic license. In real life, they're very down to earth, they're very lovely, and their music is really good. They are now my favorite band. So
Okay.
it's been a bit of a wild journey, because I kind of went from sort of doodling to, I've met the band, I've managed to like finish a comic and get it out there.
Yeah, it's a
um
great story.
and yeah, it's just been so, certainly the band members, they themselves have inspired their own characters.
Yeah.
um and then the gods. So my comic is about, well, it's called the Knave of Hearts because the Knave of Hearts is one of the gods that features in my universe. And this is kind of his, certainly the first issue is his sort of the start of his introduction. I wouldn't say it's his full introduction, because you don't really get to, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but you kind of, he's not the protagonist of issue one, but it is kind of his introduction.
Okay.
And he is kind of Cupid. That's his sort of, that's actually who he is within the sort of the known god universe, I guess you'd call it. And
The Bone
uh
God universe. That's
so,
cool.
the sort of, well, it's my, I haven't quite decided what the universe is called yet, but he is essentially Cupid. He is the god of romantic love.
Gotcha.
And it's sort of the name Knave of Hearts also came from when I was really little. Growing up, I played a lot of cards with my family. So whist, poker, sevens, snap. We never went anywhere without a deck of cards. And certainly when I was really little, and everyone had given up on playing the card games, I would sit there and I'd create stories about each like face card. So normally the Queen of Hearts was in like a romance, and like the King of Spades would be really like evil, and he would try and break them up, and like it was just silly little kid stories, but they were like dolls to me.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to build a universe around that, because like, even I did a little bit of history into like a deck of cards, and actually each king, queen, and knave, or jack as a lot of people call them, they are based on real kings and queens. I can't remember. I think the Jack of Hearts is a king or a prince called Hector. This is where my knowledge gets a little bit iffy, because it's a while since I've read it. But it was like, oh, so like I could like start creating stories and turn them into comics. Like, why not? Because yeah, I love kind of using my imagination to
Yeah,
create
you're
those sorts of stories.
very creative, Sarah. And that's why I
Thank
say
you.
I'm very interested in this topic. And honestly, when you mentioned who your inspirations were, many of mine are on that list too. So I think that, we have
Fab.
connected sort of honestly here. We have a love of the same type of material. Let's come
Yeah.
back to the visual look of your characters. First off, I'm
Yeah.
correct. You write and illustrate and letter everything yourself.
Yeah, it's the only sort of external party is my editor, who is a lovely chap called Aaron, who helped me, just because I got to a point where I was like, I've had it sort of proofread, but I need someone who's not related to me or not like a best buddy to look at this and objectively tell me whether this is good storytelling, because
Mhm.
I've not done it before. I need some guidance. I need to make sure that there aren't any inconsistencies in the story and typos. I am the queen of typos.
Sure.
So I brought an editor in to help me with that, but yeah, everything else is me, which is why it's taken me about a year and a half, I think, to kind
That's
of
what I was going to
get
ask
it
you next.
out.
That's how long, and this is 20, how many pages is it, Sarah?
So it's the total, if you include the cover, I think it's 44 pages.
Okay, so what this is what we call over here a giant size.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's an oversized comic book. The standard size is usually around 24 pages.
Okay. So
So
yeah,
where
I've
I'm
done a
gently going
giant
with that,
comic.
you're getting a little bit extra, you get some extra bang for your
Yeah.
buck there. That's a good amount of content.
Absolutely. I mean, I do include like there are a couple of pages, obviously, like adverts, but they're adverts I've drawn or adverts I've put together myself. Like it's for me, it was 44 pages of content. So
Gotcha. And this next question I want to ask you, Sarah, is going to be a little bit different for you, but I still want to
okay.
hear the answer because you always have a little bit of. So on your teammate, it's you and the editor. Is there anybody else in the production book of the book, or pretty much two people?
No, it is just us two.
Okay, gotcha. So my question was going to be, sometimes I ask people, how, like in your case, you did not use a Kickstarter or any crowdfunding source.
No,
Gotcha.
I funded, well, obviously being the author and the artist,
Save some money.
I saves quite a lot of money. I had
But
to
you still
learn
have
to
some
letter.
you still have some costs in your time, right?
Oh yeah,
Where I'm
yeah.
going with this
So
is, how did you accomplish it?
so I have a full-time job. That's kind of helped a lot. And in fact, during the production of the comic, I got a new job that was slightly better paid. And so I have been basically funding it myself because for me, it was up until probably about 3 months ago, this was just a pleasure project. It was, I love doing it. I mean, I'm not like looking at commercial success. I just want people to read it and enjoy it.
Right,
And
right.
like, it's kind of my legacy. So
Yeah.
I wasn't taking it particularly seriously until about 6 months ago, I'd say. Up until that point, it was like, well, it'll come out at some point, and like, it keeps me off the streets and from doing crime by like sitting and drawing. And I love to draw. Like,
Yeah.
if I could manage to do that as a day job, that would be amazing. But I've worked sort of freelance art, I've worked in video games before, and
Oh,
actually when it becomes, for me personally, when it becomes my source of income, it sucks quite a lot of the fun out of it.
right, right. I
Um,
get it.
so it's these comics, and I'm already like a good chunk of the way through issue 2. These are my passion, basically. This is kind of the thing that makes me
Right.
tick. It makes me happy,
And
and
that's what I like to hear about. Like, I want to ask you that question. Why did you, very talented person, right? You can illustrate, you can write, you were in video games. Why comics? Sarah, why comics?
I think because I love comics, because I find them such an interesting medium. I think I read I mean, I when I was a kid, I used to read the Asterix and Obelix comics. Like I sort of grew up with those,
Yeah.
and I sort of spent a lot of time in France growing up, and often I couldn't read the word, like the words would all be in French, but I loved the artwork. I liked the art, like seeing a story told through art. I just
Right.
thought was amazing. I thought it was magic.
Yeah, yeah.
And I still think it's magic. I think it's an art form like no others. Like
It's like no
it's it
other. I love to tell
yeah.
people that because if you love comics, it's not like a book, it's not like a movie, it's not like a song. I always like to tell people a story. When I was a little kid, maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, the first comic I ever saw was somebody no one had ever heard of. He's a Native American, what they called an Indian back then, and he was shooting a bow and arrow at a gunfighter who was getting ready to shoot him. And the first panel was straight arrow with the bow. The second panel was the guy with the arrow through his hand. He had shot the gun
Mm.
right out of his hand. And I went, I just understood sequential art. As a little kid, I got, like, it clicked. And from then
Yeah.
on, I love the comics page. And it's like you said, it's not really like the other forms of art. It's kind of a melding of art and text. And of course, you even have a musical element.
Yeah. I just think it brings all these things together in such a unique way. And I think the way that uh, and it's funny, since I've been writing and drawing this comic, the way I watch films and TV shows has changed, because I'll kind of watch it and go, oh, that's the frame I'd use to kind of, which I kind of catch myself doing that sometimes. But
Sure.
yeah, but it is, I think it's kind of magic. And I mean, you can go back to like cave paintings and stuff, and that's what cave people did. They drew comics on the walls. It is
Sure
a
did.
depiction of something happening in a sequence of artworks.
Mhm.
And I don't know, it just sort of speaks to me. And it's funny because my husband isn't into comics. He really struggles to read them. So I know they're not for everyone, but I do think they are
Right.
magical. I
Yes.
really do. So I think that was why, and I'd sort of dabbled when I was like in my early 20s with sort of just drawing, like usually with no text, because again, I didn't really see myself as a writer. I saw myself as an artist.
Right.
So I would just kind of dabble with um like sequential art with no text, like maybe the odd sound effect, but that would be it. And it didn't really tick the boxes for me. Whereas where I've written, like sat and written like a comic, and then sort of and planning out the panels and stuff, that I'm finding that really fulfilling, which surprised me. It surprised me when I came to do it, because I thought, oh, I'll
Sure.
enjoy the writing bit and I'll enjoy the drawing bit, but bringing the two together is going to be quite painful. And actually, it felt very natural when I was doing it. So yeah.
Well, and I'd love to ask you this because your process, I love to hear about the creative process, especially when it's somebody writing and drawing. When you
Yeah.
start out, do you do the script first? Do you make a couple of layouts? Like what's step one for?
Yeah. Step one is definitely fleshing out the script, for me anyway. And I mean, it's great because I'm the artist. My script, I think if I was to give my script to another artist, they'd either slap me or just send it back and go, I'm sorry, I can't work with this. Whereas obviously, because there's so much of it's in my mind when I'm writing, I can be very basic with my script. I can, like, with doing, because I hadn't done it really properly before with the Knave of Hearts, I have changed my process slightly for issue 2, but for issue 1 I didn't even put what was happening in any panels. I just wrote like little paragraph
Right.
descriptions of what was going on. I vaguely roughed out the pages, but to be honest, it was more of a giant it was like writing a short story
Yeah.
to
Which
begin
is
with.
fine if you're the one drawing it.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Right.
I think as I was starting to get to the nitty gritty of drawing the page, I was like, I need to structure this better. I need to put some structure in this because I'm losing myself in some of the pages. I'm kind of drawing too many panels that all say the same thing. I've not paced the story well by just kind of dumping it all like literally just kind of blah, 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 with probably not even any paragraphs in it. Like that's not going to work. I need to kind of think about each panel and what each panel is going to say and how I want this part of the story to be paced. So um the script got quite a big rework probably just around Christmas last year, because I just, yeah, I'd found my own process unhelpful. um
Gotcha.
but yeah, definitely script first, even if it is like not the final script, because I did find that, and again, I've got the luxury of, if as I'm drawing I'm like, actually this doesn't work, this doesn't look visually appealing, this is really boring to draw, and if it's boring to draw it's probably going to be boring to read.
Okay.
So
I
I
get you.
did it, they kind of became like symbiotic, both the script and the pages I was working on.
Mhm.
And I'm also someone, I page hop. So I don't know if I can share my screen on this, but I'm working on issue 2 on my little graphics tablet down here, and I'm working on 4 or 5 pages all at the same time, and
Yeah,
I
maybe share
flipped.
some of those with me too, and I'll put them in
Yeah,
the
I'll
feed.
send you some screenshots. I mean, some of them you will. My pages start out looking like a toddler has, like, stick men.
Hey, sometimes they're the best ones,
Yeah, and sometimes I really struggle to capture the energy of my initial scribbles, but I really am not joking. Like most people would look at it and be like, I cannot understand what's going on, but I understand what's going on, what I was
right.
trying to do. And it will, so each page will start out with really rough storyboarding, and like I've storyboarded the first half of issue 2. I
Mm.
rewrote the second half
And
of
how
issue 2
many,
fairly
so
recently.
there's you're really 1.5 right now, right? How many issues
Yeah.
will Knave of Hearts be?
Oh, well, the story I have is really big. So it might be one of those where it never ends because I've got a whole universe to play with. That's kind of what I like about what I've set up, is even if the Knave story ends, I've got all the other face cards that I could maybe then build upon within that same universe. And because I've sort of given myself the freedom of the sort of multi corridor, like each corridor, basically the universe is like a hotel, and each corridor
Right. I got it. And like I
is a
say, I hope this
world.
comes out like
Yeah,
a compliment. It has kind of like that
yeah,
world's end kind of vibe where
yeah,
like anybody could walk through the door at any minute. And that's like part of the excitement of
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it means I can take the story off in many different, like, I didn't want to set a premise that would box me in. I wanted the freedom to explore different genres, explore different, like, different worlds, different universes. Like, you know, I can dip into sci-fi, I can dip into fantasy by having
Sure.
that ability to kind of take the story off in lots of different directions. And even as I'm writing this one, a massive notebook person. I've got notebooks everywhere. So if I'm on the train going into work, for example, I might have an idea for another story that's kind of this kind of series adjacent. So it kind of happens in the same universe, but I've taken it off. And
Right.
they might never see the light of day, but that
Mhm.
kind of all helps feed into the lore that I'm trying to build within the
Perfect.
Knave
Yeah.
of Hearts.
We talk all the time about how I love lore, and it's a huge part of in our books, the world is all the same for everybody, but the characters, it's all different
Mm,
titles and stories. I was a short
yeah.
story writer before, not
Yeah.
necessarily a comic writer, but I never got any traction from short stories. But I started having
Yeah.
them illustrated, and here we are. It seems like it's going okay. Um, I also want to offer you anytime if you have any kind of thing, I'll be your digital swap partner in a second if you want to
Oh,
give away
thank
my
you.
books for free. Yeah.
Oh,
And
that is a great
would you
compliment.
consider ever doing crowdfunding with one of your books? I think you would do
Yeah,
well.
I've had a lot of people tell me I need to get issue one, or because obviously I've paid a lot of my costs have been software, or I
Mhm.
bought the font that I'm using in the comic because I wanted to make sure it was like a legitimate font, no one was going to come and get me. And actually one of my favorite artists is Colleen Doran,
Sure.
who obviously did work on the Sandman, and
Right.
I think her font's really pretty. So actually the font that's used in my comic is her font that I have purchased properly and have the license for to use within my comic.
Cool.
So that was obviously cost. I use Clip Studio. That's my sort of program that I use to do. I mean, I did start drawing traditionally, but I don't have the scanning tools and stuff to make that look good. And then I got bought a graphics tablet for Christmas last year, and that's brought the whole comic on onto digital. But yeah, so I buying things like the version of Clip Studio, which I think I've got the EX version, and that allows you to export sort of multiple files into it directly into a PDF, which makes things so much simpler. So yeah, most of my costs thus far have been editor because Aaron is great, but yeah, he cost a fair thwack. And yeah, all the software that I've needed to kind of do what I need to do, and then just Amazon charges you every time you need to get a proof, and I have so many proofs of this comic scattered through my house. Where there's one where there was a typo slip through, another where I resized a page wrong, and like all the art's really teeny tiny and in the middle of the thing. So um but I have no marketing budget. I've got no I'd like to start going to conventions, which I've never done before. I've been to conventions as a visitor going, oh, beautiful comics everywhere, but I've not
Right.
been the
Right.
person with a table going, oh, read my comic. So I'd love to be able to do that, but that would be like, you know, to get the number of copies I'd need printed. Obviously, I'd like lovely banners like you've got behind you, and like purchasing enough merch so that people can like come and see my wares. That's the sort of the stuff at the moment that I probably can't afford because I've spent so much money just getting it out there. And a lot of people have suggested that I do a crowdfunder because obviously the book is already done.
Yeah.
So
In your case, you'd be trying to
pledges,
raise marketing. Yeah,
it
it
would
makes
be
perfect
marketing
sense.
and print costs. That would be the sort of thing I'd want to do for issue one. And then I thought when I'm at the point that I need an editor for issue two, doing a Kickstarter for issue two is something. But I've never done a Kickstarter before. I have a Patreon, which and I've got a small number of really lovely patrons that have basically helped me fund to this point, as well as obviously putting in
Yeah.
quite a lot of my own money. Um, uh, so it's kind of, I want to kind of open up my community a little bit more, and also if it helps fund the comic, that can only be a good thing. So yeah, I expect I will do a Kickstarter, but I want to make sure I've got enough resource and have thought that through properly, so that people that do choose to fund my Kickstarter get everything they're expecting and are all kept to the loop. Because I understand that when you've got a Kickstarter running, it's a very intense 30 days.
Yeah, and I mean, it can be a little bit stressful, but and by the way, I'm just sharing my 2 cents worth.
Yeah.
I never disparage anybody. Say, hey, I'm going to go this route is correct for me, or this route. I think your book would perform well on Kickstarter, and I mention
Thank
it
you.
because I think it'd be also maybe you could reach the American audience. You could
Mm.
even do something like, they have what they call the fulfillment, right? Where they would sell everything, like you wouldn't even have to go to the post office or anything. You would just sell the books and then they would ship them all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and of course there's a little bit of a fee for that, so that's something you'd take a
Mm.
look at. But in your case, like, hey, I'm just trying to raise money for banners. You just take the extra money
Yeah,
and keep
I
rocking and
just want to,
rolling.
yeah, and that is what I would use it for, because I just think it would be really fun to start going to now that COVID is
Right,
not
back to
gone, but
conventions. Yeah.
it's sort of, certainly here in the UK, things are almost back to normal now.
What's
And
the biggest? Excuse my ignorance, Sarah.
No,
What
that's all
is
right.
the largest comic convention in the UK?
Oh, I don't know if we've got a largest one anymore. So there's we have the London Comic Con is um probably the biggest, but a lot of the Comic Cons I have found have sort of become more anime gaming cons. They've sort of merged
Yeah.
together a little bit. So I have actually, through one of the Facebook groups, I've got a lovely group of people that I have joined their community, and they're giving me lots of pointers on potential Comic Cons that, for a newbie who's not done it before, are fairly gentle and friendly. So I'm hoping that there's and again, sorry if these are places you do know, but like Nottingham, which is quite a famous sort of city here, they do a very nice Comic Con apparently that's very friendly. And there's lots of little pocket ones all over the UK. And actually, I'd rather start with the little ones just to kind of find my feet a bit.
Yeah.
And I understand every Comic Con has its own sort of
Identity.
feeling, identity, yeah. And I think it's only in the last 6 months that all the Comic Cons are starting to come, like, resurface like phoenixes out of the ashes after
Right, right.
COVID. And I think a lot of them have, like, just because of the nature of what COVID did, they've all changed a little bit. And who goes and how many go and all that sort of stuff isn't like a dead cert like it probably was before COVID, where it's like, oh yeah, this Comic Con always gets a great footfall. That's not necessarily guaranteed anymore, because it, like, COVID did sort of scupper a lot of plans and a lot of venues and whatnot. And we've obviously got the cost of living crisis over here at the moment, which I think is
Oh
also
yeah.
having a, yeah, our government, they sort of torpedoed our economy just before Christmas,
Oh
and so
my gosh.
everyone's feeling the pinch over here. So I think all of that has like an effect on these sorts of events. So I thought, well,
Correct.
this year, if
Yeah.
I can just get myself funded to kind of have all the bits I need to go to a convention, and maybe like start to go to some of them, it's actually, it sounds
Well,
awful,
and
but it's bad for everyone but great for me.
what I
Just
wanted
to dip
to
my toe in.
gently suggest, Sarah, was in my view, you've already done the hard part. Congratulations, your book is ready.
Thank you.
You can sort of jump right in the water. I think my guess is what you will find is very quickly you'll start to accumulate followers, and it'll be faster than you thought. Because I say that,
Yeah.
you mentioned, let's talk real quick about the Neil Gaiman influence. He's had a
Yeah.
profound influence on conventions, the way people buy books, what type of books, broadening the horizons of what comics are about. And I think that you'll find that people who like his material are going to like your material.
Oh, well, that is high praise indeed. And like, I obviously wouldn't put myself on the same pedestal as him, but yeah, that's kind of, that's music to my ears. And there are, like, I think, what's the expression that they say, that no, all art is borrowed, or all art is sort of semi-stolen, because
Sure,
we
sure.
are
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are what influences us. And yeah, like, a friendly nod to fellow Brit Neil Gaiman is kind of what I would hope my comic would do, without
Mhm.
like plagiarizing him, because I
Yeah.
think
Well,
my
and
premise
I'd
is
like to
different.
say, yeah, when I say, of course, we're not talking about plagiarizing anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, in the sense that we're all influenced by great writers. And look, he's one of
Mm,
mine too. And if you had read one of my books, I think you might say something like, hey, like, you'll see shades of, in my case, it's a little bit more like, I was a fan of, well, there was two. Black Orchid was one of Neil Gaiman's, and that definitely
Yeah.
with that was Dave McKean, I believe, right? Yeah, it was. And on the art. And then the other one was he did books of magic, and it was a series of 4 books, and each one had a different artist on it. Do you remember that one? Books of
No, I
Magic.
don't, but I'll
That's
admit
another
that.
one. And hey, and
Yeah.
again, viewers, if I got that wrong, I'm remembering that it's Neil Gaiman. Please correct me in the comments if I've got, because I sometimes mix up. But yeah, I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan, and what I was where I was going with that was we're all influenced by these great artists before us, and I think
Hmm.
that it's fair to emulate their work and to use some of the lanes that they have created for us, but
Yeah.
it's not like the work's not copied in any way or anything like that. And
No, no. You can tell that and I think his because I know he's written the is it the Norse gods is another sort of, so he's
right,
obviously very into the sort of the ancient gods and stuff, and I
yeah,
think we're all plagiarizing what the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the Celts, like,
yeah.
I want my gods to be like a to pull in influences from all the ancient gods across the world, because that's the other thing as I'm building my world, I want it to be this really big, diverse
Yeah,
sort
the
of.
characters have a very broad. Do you do you mind if I ask, or if this is not comfortable,
Yeah,
we
no,
can
no.
take this up? Are you a person of faith, or how do you come up with your concept of which
I
god is?
I'm I think if you were going to pin me to a faith, probably the closest one would be pagan.
Okay,
um
gotcha.
because I guess if I worship anything, I worship nature. Nature is my happy place. Like if I was to need to calm down and stuff, I'm an archer, so like I shoot with a bow and arrow.
Oh,
And my like my sort of calm down place is down the woods shooting plastic animals with my bow and arrow. And I
this would
do
be a
think.
valuable skill to have in the apocalypse, Sarah.
Exactly. If it all goes to pot, I will be out there hunting my dinner. Although I do eat mostly vegetarian, so
Yeah, I'm
shooting
partly
some carrots
vegetarian.
with my, yeah. We have meat's a treat in our house because I've got some health conditions, which mean I can't go full veggie, unfortunately. But yeah, meat's a treat in our house. Because I want to protect our world. We've only got one. So yeah, so I think that the sort of and pagan, there isn't like a proper structure. There's no religious structure, and I'm not very good at religious structure. I went to Catholic school, and
There's the ringer. Okay, and that's what I wanted
yeah.
to ask you was I guess I would have phrased it like this. When you're reading someone's writing, you can tell if they have an excellent working knowledge of the material. And that's what I
Mm,
got reading when you were, inferring the gods and stuff. And I was like, oh, this person has a little bit of maybe some theological background. And did I just hear you
yeah.
went to Catholic school?
I did, and it's
Okay.
funny. I went into Catholic school a staunch Christian and came out an atheist.
Atheist. So it
uh,
backfired on them, but you do
it
have a
did, really
strong
did.
working knowledge of, you have some working knowledge of theology.
Yeah, I understand sort of like how
Mhm.
religious systems, I guess, if you could
Mhm.
put it that way,
Yeah.
work. And I think studying ancient history, so I did a lot of studying of ancient Greece, and the bits that I enjoyed were the mythological, the kind of the different gods, one for each, like god of war, god of, like Dionysus. He's one of my favorites, and he's going to feature in
Oh,
my
he's
comic
got a
book
book.
under a different.
Eddie Campbell's book, Dead Face. Do you know
Oh,
that one by
really? Is
any
he in?
chance?
I've not read that one.
Yeah, it's Dead Face, and it's the story about how he's the god of revelry, and after so many centuries.
Yeah, he's God of Wine.
Yeah.
I
By the
do
way,
like
that's a
my
great
wine.
book. If you like,
Yeah,
yeah, Dead Face, that's called.
Dead Face. I will make a note of that.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
always
his
looking for comic
reworking.
recommendations.
It's his
Uh,
reworking of Greek mythology, and it's very sort of Alan Moore-ish. It's deep with a lot of
yeah,
details, and
I
Hephaestus
love
is in
Alan Moore
it.
books.
There's a bunch of great Greek gods
Yeah,
in it.
but I that was the bit I enjoyed learning about. I was less bothered about the politics of the time and who was emperor, although there were some really bonkers emperors at the time, due
Right,
to a
right,
lot of inbreeding.
right.
Like one that I think he said he looked like a goat apparently, and obviously had Nero who liked to use Christians as his torches in his gardens to light his gardens. So all completely off the wall. And I just think there are so many stories you can tell that dip into that sort of stuff. And I enjoy doing the research to then pull it in. And it does feel like issue 1 just scratches the surface of what I want to build.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, because I did think, oh, do I want to hold fire and combine issue 1 and issue 2 together? And I thought, if I do that, I'm never going to get anything out. So let's just
Well, and
wrap up issue 1
tie
where
that
I need
into our
to. Yeah.
let's tie this into our next question, right? Which is, so
Yeah.
you have your first book released. Congratulations. You've
Thank
already
you.
done something that many people haven't quite done, which is
Don't quite make
release
it
it.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm being dead serious when I say, congratulations. That's an achievement.
Thank you.
And my next question would be, what does the future hold for Sarah Webb?
Definitely more issues of Knave of Hearts, and as I said, I'm already a good chunk of the way through issue 2. So issue 2 story is fully written. The second half needs a little bit of tweaking. But yeah, it's certainly more consistent issues. Probably once every 12 months is kind of what I'm aiming for, with a bit of wiggle room, because obviously day job sometimes dips into and life dips into my comic creation time. So I would say, I would like, if I was to sort of think of where I'd want myself to be in, let's say, 5 years time, I would want at least another 3 or 4 issues of Knave of Hearts, and they'll all have like Knave of Hearts and the little subtitles and stuff out in the world, like a people reading it, because again, I'm not in this for the, like, it's not about selling books for me, it's just people reading it and enjoying the story.
Right.
And maybe with a little webtoon series on the side, because I think gatekeeping the way comics is consumed doesn't do anyone any favors. I think whether you like webtoons, whether you like Kindle, whether you like a paperback, whether you like a hardcover, whether you like it all combined, all of those are valid things. And I would like to be able to expand what I'm creating so everyone can consume what I'm creating in whatever way they feel most comfortable. So that's where I would love to be. And yeah, I think certainly Knave of Hearts, that's doable. The webcomic, that might be, just because there is only little old me
Okay.
producing it, that might be a little bit too much to kind of to do on top. But that is, if I got the time and the funds to do it, that's where I'd like to be.
That's a good answer. And Sarah, I got one last question for you, right? And
Sure.
everybody's answer of what success is looks different. So feel free to answer this however you like,
Okay.
right? So, you've launched your new series. It looks great. You got these big plans. What does success look like to you?
Oh, success to me would be if that's a hard one. I guess success for me would be to go to a comic book convention and have someone dressed as one of my characters come up to me and say, I love your comics. They speak to me. There's something about them that I just really enjoy. Like that kind of someone who's really fallen in love with the world that I've created. That is
Yeah.
success for me. Like, again, I don't even mind if I only ever have like 5 fans in the world. That doesn't, it's just, if there's one person who's like, just this comic made my day, made my week, or I just, like, I took something away from this that made me really happy, and now I've cosplayed one of your characters, that would just be like, chef's kiss.
That's great. That's a great answer. And Sarah, I'm all about manifesting positive energy. Not to
Oh,
sound like a kook,
fabulous.
but I think that you will achieve this. And I can't wait till I see a character cosplaying from your Knave of Hearts book.
Oh, that would be amazing.
That's terrific. Well, what a great answer. And in closing, I just want to say, Sarah, it is really a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
And
you
I wish
too.
you every blessing with this book. I think it's terrific. And I'm going to put the link in the comments for the viewers if they'd like to follow it. Again, that's Knave of Hearts, available on Amazon by Sarah Webb. Congrats, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. And to our viewers tuning in, thanks for joining us. This was a special episode of the Creative Cranium, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Good night, everybody.
Bye.